The next type of storm we're going to talk about are cyclones, and these are the storms that we are more familiar with here. A cyclone is just a system of winds that rotates inward to an area of low pressure. This happens counterclockwise here in the northern hemisphere, but clockwise down in the southern hemisphere. Regardless of which way it spins, though, we call it a cyclone if it spins. Now, once a tropical cyclone reaches maximum sustained winds of greater than 74 miles per hour, we classify it as a hurricane here where we live. But in other parts of the world, we might call it a typhoon or a tropical cyclone, right? Again, depending on where in the world you're located. But all of these words are they mean the same thing, right? It's just a cyclone with winds greater than 74 miles per hour. Right. So the future influence of climate change on tropical cyclones is likely to vary by region. So we're going to need a lot of regional climate models to tease apart how they're going to change where. But we do think that overall, even though changes are not well quantified, right, there is low confidence in region-specific projections of frequency and intensity, right? So we do need regional climate models to tease these apart. And even though we have results, we have low confidence in our results. Now, given that, we can still talk about the results, knowing to take them with a grain of salt. It's likely that the global frequency of tropical cyclones will either decrease or remain basically the same. But we really don't know how the number of these cyclones is going to change. However, we think it's likely that the maximum wind speed and precipitation will increase. So even though the number of storms might not increase or decrease, we don't know. We do think that any given storm is going to be more intense in terms of both wind and precipitation. Now, keeping all of this in mind, if the frequency of cyclones either decreases or remains the same, but the intensity increases, what can we expect for the frequency of hurricanes? Now, to answer this question, it makes you really think about the definitions of all these words. So remember that a hurricane is just a really strong cyclone, right? So even if the number of cyclones doesn't change, if the intensity of cyclones increases, that means that the frequency of the large cyclones is going to increase. Large cyclones we just call hurricanes, so the number of hurricanes is going to increase, we expect. Okay. So this is how, right, you can get both things can be true. The number of cyclones might decrease, but the number of hurricanes we expect to increase because they're just the largest of the cyclones or the most intense of the cyclones. Okay. But again, this varies drastically around the world, depending on what region you're looking at. There's a lot of information in this image, so we're going to focus just in on the North Atlantic where we live. If you look at the x-axis, you get that 1, 2, 3, 4. I encourage you to look at the legend there. 1 just looks at all of the cyclone frequencies. 2 is category 4 and 5, so we're looking at those big hurricanes there. 3 is the maximum intensity of the lifetime of the storm, and then 4 is precipitation rates. So here in the Northern Atlantic, right, even though the frequency of cyclones is expected to decrease, again, not with very high confidence, but on average expected to decrease, the intensity and therefore the number of hurricanes is expected to increase. And this is a common trend throughout the rest of the world. We also see this in the North Pacific and in the Southern Indian Ocean, also globally, but know that every region is slightly different.